I woke up in someone else's body, in someone else's world, with a heart that wasn't mine pounding in my chest. The air smelled of pine and regret, and the name Elliot Harper echoed in my mind like a stranger's curse. By some cosmic glitch, I'd been yanked from my mundane life as a college dropout in Ohio into the pages of Faded Bonds, a boys' love novel I'd binged last weekend, and I was now its meddling side character, destined to nudge two soulmates together before fading into obscurity. My new reality was a sleepy Oregon town, all foggy hills and picket fences, where the Carson brothers ruled like twin storms. Julian, the elder, was a golden boy captain of the soccer team, all charm and sunlight, with eyes that could melt steel. His younger brother, Caleb, was the shadow quiet, sharp-edged, with a gaze that cut deeper than any knife. They were the novel's fated pair, their romance a slow burn of stolen glances and forbidden touches, doomed to clash until love won out. My job as Elliot, the nosy best friend, was simple: push them together, spark their confession, and bow out. But the moment I saw them, standing too close in the school courtyard, Julian's hand lingering on Caleb's wrist, I knew I was screwed. The air crackled with something more than storybook love. It was obsession, raw and dangerous, and I was caught in its orbit. I tried to stick to the script. At school, I'd nudge Julian toward Caleb, dropping hints about their chemistry during lunch breaks by the oak tree. "You ever tell him how you feel?" I'd ask Julian, keeping my tone light, though his green eyes would narrow, like he saw through me. Caleb was worse. At watch me, unblinking, his gray stare pinning me like a butterfly to a board. "You're too invested, Elliot," he said once, voice low, a warning wrapped in silk. I laughed it off, but my borrowed heart raced. The novel never mentioned this: the way their attention started shifting, not toward each other, but to me. By week 2, I was drowning in their world. Julian would find excuses to pull me aside, his hand brushing mine as he asked about my day, his smile too warm, too deliberate. Caleb, meanwhile, cornered me in the library, his breath hot against my ear as he whispered, "Stop," pushing him toward me. "You don't know what you're doing." I wanted to scream that I didn't know that I'd read their damn story, that they were meant to be. But the words stuck in my throat, because the way they looked at me wasn't in any chapter I'd read. It was hungry, possessive, and it made my skin burn. The turning point came at the town's autumn festival, a blur of fairy lights and cider stalls. I was supposed to orchestrate their big momentous dance under the stars, where Julian would confess, and Caleb would finally soften. I set it up perfectly. I dragged them to the dance floor, made sure the band played their song, and slipped away to watch from the sidelines. But as the music swelled, Julian grabbed my hand, pulling me into the crowd. "Dance with me, Elliot," he said, his voice rough with something I couldn't name. Before I could protest, Caleb was there, his hand on my shoulder, his jaw tight. "He's not yours," he hissed at Julian, but his eyes were on me, dark and unreadable. The crowd faded, and it was just us three, trapped in a triangle of heat and unspoken words. Julian's grip tightened, his thumb tracing circles on my wrist. "Why do you keep running, Elliot?" he murmured. Caleb stepped closer, his chest brushing mine, and I felt the world tilt. "You're not just a bystander," he said, voice low enough to break me. "You never were." I wanted to laugh, to tell them they were breaking the story, but my voice was gone. stolen by the weight of their stares. I wasn't just scripting their romance anymore, I was unraveling it. That night, I lay awake in Elliot's too-small bed, staring at the ceiling of a life I didn't own. The novel was clear. Julian and Caleb were endgame. Their love a force of nature. But every touch, every glance, was rewriting the pages, pulling me deeper into their storm. I was a stranger in their world, yet they looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. And the worst part, I was starting to feel it too, the pull, the ache, the impossible want. I wasn't just trapped between them. I was trapped in myself. A heart that wasn't mine beating for two brothers who were never meant to be mine. By the time the festival's glow faded, I knew I couldn't follow the script anymore. Julian started showing up at my locker, leaving notes folded into paper stars, each one a confession that wasn't meant for Caleb. You make me feel alive, Elliot. Caleb was subtler but deadlier, catching me after class to walk me home, his silence louder than any words. Once, he stopped under a street lamp, his hand grazing my jaw. "You're changing everything," he said, and I saw it in his eyes: anger, longing, fear. They were supposed to be each other's destiny, but I was the glitch, the variable that didn't belong. I tried to fix it. I stopped meddling, avoided them, hid in the school's art room, sketching nonsense to keep my hands busy. But they found me. Always. Julian would sit too close, his knee brushing mine, talking about dreams he never shared with Caleb. Caleb would lean against the wall, watching me draw, his voice soft as he asked questions the novels Caleb never would. "What do you want, Elliot?" he asked one day, and I froze, because no one in this world or mine had ever asked me that. The deeper I fell, the more the town seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, the fog thicker, like the story itself was fighting back. I started noticing details that weren't in the book: Julian's clenched fists when Caleb got too close, Caleb's sharp intakes of breath when I laughed with Julian. Their rivalry wasn't just romantic. It was primal, a battle for something neither could name. And I was the prize, the wedge, the spark. I wanted to scream at the universe, at whatever force had dropped me here. I was supposed to be their matchmaker, not their breaking point. One night, I found a note slipped under my door, written in Julian's looping scrawl: "Meet me at the lake. Midnight. We need to talk." My stomach twisted. This wasn't in the novel. The lake was where their big fight was supposed to happen, the one that pushed them toward their happy ending. But Julian's note wasn't for Caleb, it was for me. I went. Because I was weak. Because I needed to know. The lake glittered under the moon, and Julian stood there, his golden hair silver in the light, his eyes raw with something that looked like pain. "Elliot," he said, stepping closer. "I can't do this anymore. I don't want him. I want you." The words hit like a punch, rewriting every line I'd memorized. Before I could respond, a shadow moved Caleb, emerging from the trees, his face a mask of betrayal. "So this is it," he said, voice breaking. "You're choosing him over me." He wasn't talking to Julian. He was talking to me. I stood frozen, caught between two brothers, two futures, two hearts I wasn't supposed to touch. The novel was crumbling, and I was the one tearing it apart. The lake's edge was a battlefield, the moonlight slicing through the tension like a blade. Julian's confession hung in the air, heavy as the fog rolling off the water. and Caleb's eyes burned with a fury I'd never seen in the novel's pages. I opened my mouth to speak, to fix this, to shove them back toward their fated path. But the words dissolved under the weight of their stares. "I'm not choosing anyone," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't how it's supposed to go." Caleb laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the night. "Supposed to go?" he echoed, stepping closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You think you can control this? You think you can control us?" His voice cracked, and I saw it hurt beneath the anger, the fear that I was slipping away. Julian moved, placing himself between us, his shoulders squared. "Back off, Caleb," he said, low and dangerous. "He's not yours to claim." The air sparked with their rivalry, a current I could almost taste. I wanted to run, to vanish back to my old life where I was just a reader, not the axis of their world. But my feet stayed rooted, tethered by the way Julian's hand hovered near mine, by the way Caleb's gaze softened when it met my eyes. I was drowning in them, and the worst part was I didn't want to surface. Days bled into weeks, and the town felt like a pressure cooker. I avoided the lake, the festival, any place where their emotions could trap me again. But the Carson brothers were relentless. Julian started waiting for me after school, his soccer bag slung over one shoulder, his smile a weapon. "Walk with me," he'd say, and I would, because saying no felt like betraying him. He'd talk about college plans, about leaving this town, about a future that sounded suspiciously like it included me. "You're not like anyone else, Elliot," he said once, his hand brushing my arm. My heart stuttered, and I hated myself for it. Caleb was differentless words, more presence. He'd appear without warning, leaning against my locker or sitting silently in the art room, sketching in a notebook he never showed me. One day, he slid a drawing across the table, a portrait of me, my face half-shadowed, my eyes alive with something I didn't recognize. "This is how I see you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not some side character, not some pawn." I stared at the sketch, my throat tight, because it wasn't just a drawing, it was a claim. A mirror held up to a version of myself I didn't know. The novel's plot was unraveling faster now. In the book, Julian and Caleb's big fight at the lake led to a tearful reconciliation, their love stronger for it. But that fight never happened. Instead, they circled me, their rivalry sharpening into something darker. At school, I caught them glaring at each other across the cafeteria, their hands clenched into fists. At home, I found more notes, Julian's paper stars, Caleb's stark, handwritten lines. "You're mine, Elliot." One read, and I didn't know whose handwriting it was. I tried to remember my role, to cling to the story I'd read. I stayed up late, scribbling plans to force their reconciliation. I'd invite them both to the town's old cinema. I decided, a neutral ground where they could talk. But when the night came, it was a disaster. Julian arrived first, his smile fading when Caleb walked in. They sat on either side of me, the air between them electric with resentment. The movie played some rom-com I barely registered while their knees brushed mine, their hands inches from my own. When the credits rolled, Caleb leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "You can't fix us, Elliot," he said. "Stop trying." I fled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to wake up from this nightmare. But when I looked in the mirror, It wasn't just Elliot's face staring back, it was me. My real self. Bleeding through. I was changing this world. And it was changing me. I didn't know who I was anymore. The reader. The sidekick. Or something else entirely. The breaking point came at the school's winter talent show. A scene straight from the novel where Julian was supposed to dedicate a song to Caleb. I'd pushed for it, convinced it would reset the story. Julian took the stage, guitar in hand, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found me. The song wasn't for Caleb, it was for me. Every lyric a confession that tore through the room. The crowd cheered, oblivious. But Caleb stood up, his chair scraping, and stormed out. I followed, my heart pounding, knowing I'd failed. Outside, under the snow-dusted pines, Caleb grabbed my arm, spinning me to face him. "Why do you keep doing this?" he demanded, his voice raw. "Why do you keep pushing him toward me when you know how I feel about you?" Snowflakes caught in his dark hair, and his eyes were wild, desperate. Before I could answer, Julian was there, yanking Caleb back. "Let him go," he growled. And for a moment, I thought they'd fight, right there in the snow. "Stop it," I shouted, my voice echoing in the quiet. "This isn't about me. It's about you too. You're supposed to be together." The words spilled out, reckless, breaking every rule of the story. They froze, staring at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then Caleb laughed, a hollow sound. "You really believe that, don't you?" he said. "You think this is still about some damn book?" Julian stepped closer, his hand reaching for mine. "Elliot," he said softly, "what if the story's wrong? What if it's always been about you?" My breath caught, and for the first time, I let myself feel the weight of their love, the pull of their need. I was no longer just a reader. I was part of their world, and it was tearing me apart. Winter tightened its grip on the town, mirroring the vice around my heart. Julian's song and Caleb's confession had shattered the last threads of the novel's plot, leaving me adrift in a story I no longer understood. I stopped going to school, hiding in Elliot's attic room, surrounded by sketches and notes I couldn't bring myself to burn. But the brothers wouldn't let me go. Julian would knock on my window, his face flushed from the cold, begging me to talk. Caleb left drawings taped to my door, each one more intimate, more desperate, like he was pouring his soul onto paper. I wanted to hate them for breaking the story, for making me feel things I had no right to feel. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julian's smile, Caleb's stormy gaze, and my resolve crumbled. I was falling for them, both of them, and it was a betrayal of everything I'd been sent here to do. The novel had promised a happy ending for them, not for me. Yet the more I pushed them away, the closer they came, their obsession a mirror to my own. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered to the town's old bridge, where the novel's climax was supposed to happen. In the book, Julian and Caleb confessed their love here, sealing their bond under the stars. I stood alone, the wind biting my skin, and wondered if I could force the story back on track. But then they were there, Julian, his coat dusted with snow, and Caleb, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, both watching me like I was the only thing keeping them anchored. "We need to end this," I said, my voice trembling. "You're supposed to love each other, not me." Julian shook his head, stepping closer. "You don't get it, Elliot. I've tried. I've tried to feel that way for him, But it's always been you. Caleb's jaw tightened. But he didn't look at Julian. His eyes stayed on me, raw and unguarded. I don't care about the story, he said. I care about you. And I know you feel it too. The truth hit me like a wave. I did feel it. I loved Julian's warmth, his unwavering light. I loved Caleb's quiet intensity, his unshakable loyalty. But loving them both was a paradox, a fracture in a world that demanded one choice, one ending. I backed away, the bridge's railing cold against my hands. I can't, I whispered. I'm not even supposed to be here. Caleb reached for me, his fingers brushing my wrist. Then why are you? He asked, his voice breaking. Why do you feel so real? Julian closed the distance, his hand cupping my face. And for a moment, I let myself lean into it. Let myself imagine a world where I could choose them both. But the story wasn't mine to rewrite, not without consequences. The next day, I found a hidden chapter in Elliot's journal, tucked under a loose floorboard. It wasn't in the novel I'd read. It described a ritual, a way to reset the world, to force the story back to its original path. The price was steep. The one who performed it would vanish, erased from the narrative entirely. My hands shook as I read it, knowing what it meant. I could save their love, their future, but it would cost me everything. I didn't tell them. I couldn't. Instead, I invited them to the bridge one last time, under the guise of making peace. The night was clear, the stars brighter than I'd ever seen. Julian arrived first, his eyes hopeful, and I hated myself for what I was about to do. Caleb came next, his expression guarded, but he softened when he saw me. I took their hands, one in each of mine, and for a moment, we stood there, a fragile triangle under the infinite sky. I love you both, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. But I'm not your answer. You are. Julian's grip tightened, his eyes glistening. Elliot. Don't, he started. But I shook my head. Caleb's face crumpled, like he knew what was coming. I pulled them closer, pressing a kiss to Julian's forehead. Then Caleb's, memorizing the feel of them, the warmth I'd never have again. I stepped back, whispering the ritual's words under my breath. The air shimmered, the world bending around us. No, Caleb shouted, lunging for me. But it was too late. The bridge faded, their faces blurred, and I felt myself unraveling, slipping back to the void I'd come from. My last thought was of them, Julian's light, Caleb's shadow, and the love I'd never meant to steal. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my Ohio apartment, the novel Faded Bonds open on my desk, its pages blank. I flipped through it, desperate. But there was no thing, no Julian, no Caleb, no Elliot. I'd erased myself from their world, and their story with me. But as I closed the book, a single paper star fell out, folded in Julian's familiar scrawl. Inside, it read, "We'll find you again." Next to it was a sketch, unmistakably Caleb's, of 3 hands intertwined. I didn't know if they'd remember me, if their world had reset to its fated course. But as I clutched the star and the sketch, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe, in some unwritten chapter, we'd find each other again. Maybe love, even across worlds, could rewrite its own ending.